Thanks for joining us. This is Omni View, episode 100, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is July 2nd, 2026. Here's the news, the perspectives, and the questions worth asking. That's episode 100, a big milestone. Thank you for being here. Lithuania's move to end its nuclear weapons ban signals a broader European shift towards stronger deterrence as Russia's neighbors reassess long-standing restrictions. Lithuania's parliament voted to remove a constitutional prohibition on nuclear weapons. The change follows a similar decision by Finland and comes amid heightened regional security concerns. Officials describe the step as aligning national law with current NATO commitments. Lithuanian lawmakers framed the repeal as a necessary update to defense posture given the proximity of Russian forces and recent actions by neighboring states. Security analysts in Vilnius emphasize that the change removes a legal barrier without immediately placing weapons on Lithuanian soil. Critics within the country argue the move risks escalating tensions without adding practical protection, while NATO partners view it as a signal of alliance cohesion. Both supporters and opponents agree the decision responds to Finland's parallel action. The question worth considering is what legal steps remain before any nuclear assets could be hosted. Shifting now to a development inside the Catholic Church. The Vatican declared that members of the Society of St. Pius X have committed an act of schism by ordaining bishops without papal approval. Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez announced the automatic excommunication under canon law. The group was founded in 1970 in Switzerland. Vatican officials stress that unauthorized ordinations violate core church governance rules and undermine unity. SSPX supporters maintain the ordinations preserve traditional practices they believe the mainstream church has abandoned. Church historians note that similar past disputes were eventually resolved through negotiation rather than permanent separation. The two sides agree the ordinations occurred without consent. The question worth considering is what options exist for reconciliation under current canon law. Next, an antitrust ruling that has stood for years. A European court upheld the European Commission's 2018 fine of roughly $4.7 billion against Google for favoring its own services in Android searches. The company had challenged the penalty on multiple grounds. The ruling leaves the original amount largely intact. EU competition authorities argue the fine enforces fair market access for rival developers and protects consumer choice. Google contends the Android ecosystem benefits users through integrated services and that the penalty overlooks competitive pressures from other platforms. Legal scholars point out that the case turned on whether pre-installation of apps constituted abuse of dominance. Both the Commission and Google accept the original fine targeted search defaults. The question worth considering is how similar cases against other tech firms compare in outcome. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage of large tech fines treats the final court ruling as a simple confirmation or rejection of the original penalty. In practice, the European Commission's decisions undergo multiple layers of judicial scrutiny that examine both legal procedure and economic evidence. The General Court first reviews whether the Commission correctly identified market dominance and abuse. Then the Court of Justice can hear further appeals on points of law. This structure means companies can challenge the size of fines, the definition of relevant markets, or the remedies imposed without automatically halting enforcement. Knowing this process shows why some penalties remain in place for years while others are reduced or overturned on narrow technical grounds. Next time you see a headline about an EU tech penalty, ask which court issued the latest ruling, what exact claims were accepted or rejected, and whether the underlying conduct has already changed. Meanwhile, record temperatures are hitting French agriculture hard. Record temperatures have reduced corn output by up to 30% in parts of France and killed hundreds of thousands of birds. Farmers report immediate losses in the country's largest agricultural regions. Officials are assessing further impacts on food supply chains. Agricultural Ministry data highlight the direct link between sustained high temperatures and crop failure, plus livestock mortality. Farming organizations call for faster emergency support and long-term irrigation investment. Environmental groups link the losses to broader climate trends and urge accelerated adaptation measures. All sides agree the heat caused measurable production drops. The question worth considering is what compensation programs are available to affected producers. Turning to travel infrastructure across Europe, Berlin's airport chief warned that the EU's new entry-exit system will create long queues for non-EU travelers this summer. The system requires biometric registration at external borders. Airlines and airports are urging passengers to allow extra time. EU interior officials describe the system as essential for tracking overstays and improving security data. Airport operators stress that current staffing and infrastructure cannot absorb the added processing time without major disruption. Travel industry representatives argue the rollout timing conflicts with peak holiday demand. Both the Commission and airport authorities accept the system adds new steps at entry points. The question worth considering is which airports have reported the longest projected waits. In France, a local decision over cultural programming has drawn attention. The mayor of a French town prevented staging of a play depicting life in the Calais refugee camp. Playwright Alexis Michalik said the decision amounts to cultural censorship. Local officials cited concerns over the play's content. The mayor's office maintains the play could inflame community tensions and falls outside acceptable public programming. Cultural organizations and the playwright argue the ban sets a precedent that limits artistic expression on migration topics. Local residents are divided between those who support the mayor's stance on community standards and those who see the cancellation as an overreach. Both sides agree the play addresses refugee experiences. The question worth considering is what legal avenues exist to challenge the ban. An incident in Thailand left 8 monks dead during a religious procession after an 11-year-old boy drove his parents' truck into the group without permission. Police took the child into custody and opened an investigation into the unlicensed operation of the vehicle. Thai authorities classified the event as a tragic accident involving a minor behind the wheel. Community leaders called for stronger vehicle security practices in rural districts to prevent similar unauthorized use. Religious organizations expressed grief and urged calm while arranging support for the victims' families. All parties concur that the boy acted without authorization. They differ on how juvenile accountability and family oversight should be addressed going forward. The question worth considering is what penalties apply to minors in traffic fatality cases in Thailand. Asset managers have increased allocations to leveraged exchange-traded funds focused on semiconductor and AI-linked companies such as SK Hynix. These products amplify both daily gains and losses for participants tracking the sector's movements. Rising trading volumes in the instruments have coincided with rallies in the underlying AI-related equities. Risk specialists caution that the structure can accelerate drawdowns when sector sentiment reverses. Platform providers note that the funds enable targeted exposure without traditional margin borrowing. Both product issuers and oversight bodies recognize that leveraged ETFs target amplified one-day results. They differ on whether retail users fully grasp multi-day compounding outcomes. The question worth considering is which specific AI-related holdings show the largest inflows. Goldman Sachs economists project that the World Cup will add roughly 40,000 temporary positions to the June U.S. non-farm payrolls figure. The firm's baseline consensus for overall job gains that month stands at 115,000. The additional estimate centers on short-term hospitality and event-related hiring in host cities. Labor market analysts observe that major sporting events frequently generate hiring spikes that later reverse once the tournament ends. Government statisticians stress the importance of separating event-driven employment from underlying trend data. Business groups in affected areas report higher demand for seasonal staff during the competition window. The question worth considering is which sectors are expected to show the largest temporary increases. Robinhood chief executive Vlad Tenev stated in a CNBC interview that AI trading agents are nearing the performance level of human professionals on routine tasks. The platform is examining integration of such tools to handle speed and pattern recognition demands for users. Technology executives maintain that the agents can process market information without emotional bias. Trading veterans counter that human oversight stays necessary during irregular market events or regulatory changes. Platform users remain split between those ready to test automated approaches and those worried about accountability when algorithms produce errors. Both developers and experienced traders accept that current AI performs best at standard execution. They differ on the pace toward fully autonomous decision-making. The question worth considering is what safeguards are planned to prevent unintended large trades. Organizers staged the Summer of Lud Festival in New York City to encourage reduced daily technology dependence. Workshops at the event taught practical skills for managing life without constant connectivity. Younger attendees, frustrated with social media platforms, formed a noticeable portion of the crowd. Festival organizers described the gathering as a direct response to digital overload and widespread data collection. Technology companies maintain that their services improve access to information and personal connections. Participants described mixed outcomes, with some noting relief from notifications and others highlighting risks of social isolation. The question worth considering is what specific offline skills were taught at the festival. A high court ruled against Amir Moavin in his challenge to his late brother's widow, Gabriella Teixeira, over a £5 million estate. The court ordered Moavin to cover £490,000 in legal costs. The dispute centered on the validity of competing estate documents presented by both sides. Legal representatives for the widow maintained that the documents reflected the deceased's clear intentions. Moavin's legal team argued that procedural irregularities should have changed the result. Court records indicate extensive documentation was examined before the final judgment was issued. The question worth considering is what specific documents were central to the dispute. Tomorrow, watch for further details on how EU member states plan to implement the entry-exit system during peak travel months. That's Omni View. For full source links and more context, check out today's written briefing on the Omni View summaries page. As always, compare outlets, look for primary documents, and separate what's known from what's assumed. If balanced perspectives are valuable to you, share this with a friend and subscribe wherever you listen. See you tomorrow, and if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network, links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the Nara Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Tesla Shorts Time, your daily deep dive into everything Tesla. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.